Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends, and thank you, Glenn, for that very stellar introduction here today. It's good to be here. Want to get into this SAVE Act today. I want to talk a little bit about the budget resolution that has passed the House of Representatives by a razor-thin margin. That'll be later today in the program as well. And I also want to share a little bit later in this first hour, just a little personal note, something that I just feel that I want to say and share with you. So there's lots of things in the stack of stuff. If you're new to this program, the stack of stuff is a page on our website. It is a hat tip, recognizing the honor of the late, great Rush Limbaugh. He used to call the stack of stuff his physical papers, which he would take in his hands and shake to let you know he had them there. We have a digital stack of stuff at toddhuffshow.com. You'll see the things that we're going to talk about there in case you want to read more about it, or maybe I didn't get to it and I just mentioned the topic or whatever. Anyway, that is where you would go for that. Before we get started, though, my friends, I want to remind you, MyPillow has a large allotment of sheets. They got these sheets because the big box stores had placed the order for them. The big box stores fell through yet again for MyPillow, and so since they placed this large order as a wholesale order, they're going to give you, if you want to take a look at these sheets, they're going to give you wholesale prices, basically. So they've got Giza Dream sheets. That's what we have here in our household. They also have Percale bed sheets. You can check these out. They are deeply discounted, incredible prices, and they're available right now. Until this allotment runs out, mypillow.com is where you can go. Promo code Todd will get you those specials. They've even got free shipping options that are available. This allotment is not going to last long. Check it out now, mypillow.com. Promo code Todd gets you that special discounted wholesale price, or if you prefer, you can call 800-615-2015. Again, 800-615-2015. All right, so let's start here today with this SAVE Act. Now, if you've been on social media, if you've listened to some of the folks on the political left, you would have heard some incorrect information floating around there regarding what is known as the SAVE Act. This is the act that's requiring people to be able to prove that they are citizens to vote in federal elections. This should be, you might have thought, if you were an alien from outer space and you landed on this planet here in the United States and you understood, you just started to learn about the type of government we have. You learned about these things that we have that are called elections. You might have just assumed, you probably would have assumed that we had a process to verify that the people coming in to vote were actually the people who are supposed to vote. You might have been shocked to find out that we didn't. Now, states might, but the federal government didn't require it, and because of that, some states, I knew a guy in, I think it was California, and he told me that he didn't have to show anything to go vote. He went in, they asked him his name, he told him his name, and as they were going through the paper, he said, I saw my name on there. I think he said 4. It was either 3 or 4 times. So let's say his name was Robert Smith. It might have been Robert Smith, Robert L. Smith, and Bob Smith. So in theory, of course, this gentleman didn't do this because he's got integrity, but in theory, he could have come and voted as many times as his name was on there. There are so many problems with this sort of approach and process that it's obvious that we need to have a remedy for it. And so the House of Representatives passed with every Republican vote. Dare I say this, by the way, It was a bipartisan piece of legislation. All the Republicans in the House of Representatives and 4 Democrats voted in favor of this bill. But now they are busy misrepresenting it. You might have seen this, what I'm about to read. I saw this on Twitter, actually, or X. I might have seen this other places too. I think I've seen this multiple places now as I say this, but I pulled it from Twitter. Here's what it says. It looks like it was an original tweet from, I'm just going to read from a Democrat representative. So here's what it says. Under the Republicans' SAVE Act, S-A-V-E, SAVE Act, your driver's license won't be enough to vote. You'll need 1, a passport, which more than half of Americans don't have and costs at least $130. Or number 2, a birth certificate with your current legal name, which nearly 70 million married women lack. Looks like they may have realized what a woman is here. I doubt it, but they use the term women, which is plural, multiple of the individual woman. So perhaps they've stumbled into a truth, realizing that there are people who are biologically different, genetically different than their male counterparts. Or 3 here, military service papers, not a military ID alone with sensitive info. That's how this is being portrayed. I'll be blunt. This is a modern-day Jim Crow bill that restricts access to the ballot box. That's how this is being portrayed. The left says, listen, asking people to prove who they are, that is like a Jim Crow law. This is unacceptable. This can't be allowed to happen. This is racist, sexist, anything, whatever we can come up with. This is what it is. They're trying to disenfranchise voters. That's the argument. I'm not saying it. I'm telling you what these knuckleheads and clowns are out there saying. AOC tweeted something similar to this. Well, posted it on X. Listen, sorry, Elon, old habits are hard to break. It's always going to be a tweet to me. AOC, yesterday afternoon, House Republican. It's got the siren icon. Lights are sirens, emergency signals, horns. DEFCON 10 is happening here, according to the Democrat Party, because the House of Representatives is demanding that people in this country who vote in federal elections prove who they are. That is such a preposterous idea to the Democrats. It's one of the reasons, by the way, why this group of people is not supported. They're becoming less and less favorable to people who have any degree of sense whatsoever. This is just nonsense. Here's what she tweeted, AOC. House Republicans just passed a bill that would disenfranchise 70 million married American women. Oz, did you know this? Oz did not know. You've been disenfranchised by Republicans. You're not going to be allowed to vote. Good luck with that. It's just another way that the Republicans are keeping the woman down. Under the SAVE Act, AOC writes, women who took their spouse's last name and don't have an updated passport or birth certificate would be turned away at the polls. That's what she says. Again, this isn't true. I'm just telling you what they're saying. Tristan Snell, who I see on X, there you go, Elon, I got it right that time. As I see on X from time to time, up there, probably in the group of the most egregious misrepresenters, I should say, of truth and reality that I'm aware of. He tweets this: forcing people to pay $130 for a passport in order to vote is just a Jim Crow poll tax by another name. It is blatantly, he says, unconstitutional. I have lots of questions. So, do I take these one by one? I have one more that I want to read to you from Benny Thompson. Benny Thompson, representative, leftist lunatic in Congress, joining the likes of AOC and those other knuckleheads who are saying ridiculous and absurd things. He tweeted out this: House Republicans' SAVE Act blocks nearly 70 million women from registering to vote just because they changed their name after marriage. Voting is a fundamental right. Efforts to silence women at the ballot box are nothing short of voter suppression, and we won't stand for it. I tell you what, the intentionality of this as far as trying to deceive and mislead people is astonishing. Let me go back to the tweet I read previously. Tristan Snell. Not even 100% sure. He's a lawyer, commentator, fighter. He's out there fighting for democracy, making sure that you don't need to have an ID to vote in federal elections. An American hero. I think you should add that to your bio, Mr. Snell. But going back to his tweet here, forcing people to pay $130 for a passport in order to vote is just a Jim Crow poll tax by another name. Now, we don't have poll taxes, and we shouldn't have poll taxes. Poll taxes are when you require someone to pay in order to cast their ballot. That's not how this works. That is a direct way that you can discourage people from voting. You know, I have a friend. He's in pharmaceuticals, and he had told me, he's in the pharmaceutical industry, and he told me that there was a study done. This is several years ago, maybe many years ago, and they found that requiring people to pay even $1, I think it was Medicaid, $1 copay, $1 to see a doctor, whatever. The drastic amount of, the drastic reduction in the number of people that would then go to the doctor, which some people would say, well, you don't want to discourage people from going to the doctor. Of course, you don't want to discourage people who need to go to the doctor, but you want to discourage people that maybe really shouldn't go to the doctor. You don't need to go to the doctor for every splinter. And, you know, if there's never a cost, then there's no mechanism to say, is it worth it? Should I wait another couple days? Should I let this cold run its course? Is it really that bad sort of thing? Anyway, so having a poll tax would certainly impact people who are their willingness to vote. And that's not a good thing. But let me ask Mr. Snell this, who's out there fighting for democracy, American hero here. I wonder, Mr. Snell, is it a tax? Let's say that I require ballots to be mailed in my state. And let's say that in order to return the ballot, does the state have to fund the stamp? Maybe they do in the states that require that. But is that required? Is asking someone to apply a stamp to use the U.S. Postal Service, a government agency, to deliver the mail, is that a poll tax? What about if there's no mail-in voting? What if you actually have to go in person to cast a ballot? I mean, the audacity of that idea. If you have to go in person to cast a ballot and you have to get there, should you get free transportation? I mean, what if it's too far to walk? What if it's not? I mean, if it's on a bus route, do you get a free fare that day? If it's not on a bus route and you have to use your car, do you get a gas card to pay for gas? What if your tire is flat? Do you get you have to replace a tire to go drive to the polls to vote? Do you get that tire reimbursed? I mean, I wonder what constitutes a tax for Tristan Snell and the left here. This is not what's happening. This is a reasonable way to make sure that the people who are voting in our elections are legally able to do so. The left here, my friends, is crying wolf as usual. I've got a synopsis of this article that I'm going to get to here in just a moment. Before I do that, though, my friends, let me speak to those of you who are in sales. If you're in sales, let me ask you this. Are you where you want to be? Are your sales numbers where you want them to be? Do you think you've reached your potential? Are you losing prospects that you think if you were better skilled at answering their questions and navigating some of those difficult conversations, could you bring more of those people over to your company, solve their problem, help your company grow, and get compensated in the process? Whether you're struggling to close deals, if you just want to sharpen your skills and get a few percentage points better on your closing percentages, Matt Easton University are here to help you. And they have a training system that I think is top-notch. Easton University, I think, is as good as anything I have ever seen. I would put this up against even the stuff Zig Ziglar produced, and I'm a huge fan of the late, great Zig Ziglar. This is not a cookie-cutter training. There's a process, but there's also coaching involved to help you navigate the complexities of it. If you follow the system, it will pay off, but you've got to take the first step. And that first step is go to toddhuffshow.com/Easton to get more information, to sign up to become a student of Easton University. It's not cheap, but it is worth it. It will pay for itself if you do the lessons, if you follow the system, if you join the sales coaching calls, you will see improvement, my friends. Don't let it pass you by. And I'll add this, as a listener of this program, you get the unique opportunity to, once you become a student, to jump on a welcome call with Matt. He's going to walk you through your particular challenges, where you are specifically with the sales process and all that sort of stuff, so that you hit the ground running day number one with Easton University. Easton University is where you go, but you get there, toddhuffshow.com/Easton, EASTON. So let's take a look here at this act that the left is frantically freaking out about. I had a synopsis pulled together using we got some pretty advanced AI here, which is really kind of interesting to me. And I've learned how to train this stuff to do things without bias. Although I did have to smack back a little bit on this particular analysis. But anyway, the SAVE Act, it stands for the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It's proposed legislation. It's now passed the House of Representatives, by the way, that would amend the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 to require documentary proof of U.S. citizenship for voter registration in federal elections. Again, if you were an alien from a foreign planet, you would have thought this was already built into our system. You would have assumed that you had to prove that you were able to vote in federal elections before you were just given the keys and allowed to just vote away. You would be incorrect. The act aims to ensure that only eligible citizens can vote in U.S. elections, though it has sparked significant debate about the potential voter disenfranchisement. So, here are the acceptable forms of identification, my friends. Here they are. The SAVE Act accepts the following forms of identification: Real ID, Act-compliant identification that indicates U.S. citizenship. Oz and I flew here, I don't know. We jumped on an airplane here back in February, I guess. And I didn't know this. I mean, I knew this, but I didn't know the deadlines. If you don't have a real ID, you're not going to be able to fly. You're not going to be able to get past security. Oz, correct me if I'm wrong, after May. It was May, right? So you don't have, I don't know when in May. I don't know if it's May 1st, May 31st. But if you don't have a real ID, you better get one if you're going to be flying here in May, because the guy, the TSA agent, told us that. You guys haven't updated your ID. If you want to fly again after May, you're going to have to do that. So, number one, that's a thing. If you have a real ID, it is covered. There's nothing. This is just a formality. This is just to make sure that people who don't have that take the steps to ensure that they get a voter ID to prove that they are an American citizen. But there's other forms of identification as well. So you don't need any of these. Let me put it this way. You don't need any of these if you have a real ID. You won't need any of these other things. But if you don't have one of the real IDs, you're going to need to do this in order to prove that you are an American citizen. Here we go. A valid U.S. passport, U.S. military identification with service records showing U.S. birth, government-issued photo ID showing U.S. birth. So let me pause here for a moment. The left wants it to sound like Republicans are getting together and saying, we don't want certain groups of people to vote, so we want to make it as hard for them to vote as possible. And one of the things the left accuses Republicans, conservatives, of figuring out is that this group of people that we don't want to vote, allegedly, ostensibly, is they can't get their hands on voter ID, any form of identification. So let's make it as hard as possible. Let's make it a requirement for them to have an ID. So therefore, when they go to vote, They won't be able to because they don't have the ID. Now, forget the fact that you need an ID for any number of things, right? You need an ID to get on the airplane. I just shared that example. You know this. You need an ID to open a bank account. You need an ID to buy alcohol, tobacco products. You need an ID. I mean, there's so many things. You need an ID to apply for certain jobs. You need an ID for all sorts of stuff just to live in today's world. You need an identification, photo ID. So that seems like not that big of a burden, of a hurdle. But see, the reason they keep harping on this is because if they say, you know what, let's just make sure our elections are more secure, that undermines A, Democratic strategy at some point. B, that undermines their argument that the elections are the safest and most secure ever in American history. Because why now, if these are so secure, do we suddenly need this additional measure to make sure that people who are not citizens are not voting in elections? It is a fact that people are not citizens are voting in elections. The question is how many. That's the question. The question is not whether anyone does. The question is how many do it. And there's, of course, a wide range. Some people think 3 people do it nationwide, and other people think it's a much bigger problem than that. So, now, the summary goes on to say here, as I'm nearing the end of this first segment, if the primary ID doesn't explicitly show citizenship, it must be accompanied by any one of these additional documents. So the documents that I mentioned, so long as they indicate that you are a citizen of the United States of America, as long as that's the case, then you're fine. But if it doesn't indicate that, then you're going to have an additional piece of identification. Certified birth certificate from state, local, or tribal government. U.S. hospital record of birth extract. Final adoption decree showing U.S. birth. Consular report of birth abroad, naturalization certificate or certificate of citizenship, American Indian card with KIC classification. So, more on this on the other side of the break. The left is trying to make you believe, me believe, the rest of America believes, to believe that the Republicans are trying to disenfranchise voters, especially women, because women vote Democrat, and we got to stop them from voting. That's what they want you to believe. That's not what's happening here. But I have to take a break, my friends. Sit tight. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. So, continuing this discussion here about identification to vote in elections, which should be a no-brainer for folks. You know what? A couple of years ago, my dad has the best, sometimes unintentional sense of humor. But I remember we were talking about a group of people that were being inducted to this Hall of Fame. And my dad would say, well, that's a no-brainer. That person should be in. And for the people who were not supposed to be in, according to my father, they were brainers. So you'd say a name, that's a no-brainer. No-brainer, no-brainer, that's a brainer. I'm not really sure where he came up with that, but I kind of like it. So it's a no-brainer here that we should have some way to identify who we are to prove that we are citizens, capable, eligible, legally allowed to vote in an election. What's so hard to accept about that? What's so hard to agree with that about? I mean, this is basic, fundamental sort of stuff. I didn't mention you need an ID to drive a vehicle, right? I mean, that goes without saying. So there are changes to the IDs. You have to have an ID that shows that you are a U.S. citizen to vote. And why did we have to do that? Because we've got state governments out there that are giving illegal aliens driver's licenses. So if you're an illegal, driver's license isn't good enough anymore. It's crazy. So part of the problem is these leftist states, these blue states that have been run by lunatics for decades, have eroded even what it means to have a driver's license. Why? I mean, you're not supposed to be in our country, but now you have a driver's license. a form of identification that is state issued, but you're issuing it to someone who's not supposed to be here at all. You don't care because you've created a sanctuary state. You want their vote. You want to demand that they're, insist that they're not voting, but yet you insist on making it pretty easy for them to vote because you don't seem to, those on the radical left, want to stand in defense of these common sense ideas. Now, the other issue about this is this claimed impact that this is going to have on married women. Married women and their name changes. Now, I don't know. This says, I read somewhere, this says 79% of married women change their last names. Does that sound right to you? 79%, 4 out of 5? She doesn't know. I would have guessed it being more than that. I don't know. I think in my universe, it's a bigger number than that, people that I personally know. But anyway, 79% of married women change their last names, potentially creating, according to this synopsis here, discrepancies between their birth certificate and current legal names. Folks, I'm going to go back to this again. The form of identification that is going to solve this problem, if you have it, which everybody is supposed to get this, is the real ID. When I renew my driver's license, or if I want to do it now because if I want to fly, if you want to do that, you need to do that now. And your ID is going to show that you are an American citizen. It's going to show that. That ID will work. So then suddenly all of this fear-mongering that exists, Republicans trying to keep women from voting, is absolutely 100% simply not the case. It is like, so let's talk in 2026. Now this thing, well, assuming this thing passes, it's going to have to pass the Senate. That seems unlikely at this point, though we did have 4 House members join. We would need, 7 senators to actually cross over and vote for this in the Senate because of the filibuster requirement. There's 53, and we'd have to keep all Republicans, which I think we probably would. Who knows? I mean, some of these folks never cease to amaze me. Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and others. I'll just leave it at that. So it's not a factor. And it's not a factor if you have a real ID. That's the name of the ID. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying if it's not a fake ID. I'm saying if it's not real ID compliant. So I have a question for you. How many people, when they initiated or instituted the real ID requirements, how many people did you hear complaining in the media and the Democrat Party that this was going to be an unnecessary burden for women? How many people did you hear saying that women weren't going to be able to get these because their names on their birth certificates didn't match their last names? How many people did you hear crying about this? Have you heard a single person? No, you didn't, because it's not real. What only makes this real, it's still not real, but what makes it a real issue, even though they're making it up, we have to have real conversations about it because these people are imposters. They are making things up on the fly. The reason we have to talk about these things now is because since it's touching the issue of voting, and since they have allegedly been on the side of as loose of voting rules as possible, for reasons that I'll leave up to you to figure out why, to navigate that and come to a conclusion, one has to believe that something fishy is going on here because none of this stuff is true. None of this stuff is true. The act requires states to establish processes for handling name discrepancies, allowing applicants to provide additional documentation to prove their identity. However, the act does not explicitly define what constitutes sufficient additional documentation, leaving implementation details to individual states. Well, whoop-de-poo. States will figure this out. They're not going to say, oh my goodness, your name doesn't match your birth certificate. We got to take you off the voter rolls. Folks, you can be dead in some states. People can supply a death certificate and you may not be taken off the voter rolls. This is preposterous. This is virtue signaling. This is phony political narratives 101 being led by the likes of AOC and the other folks that I read tweets from earlier in this program. Alternative verification. The act does include provisions for alternative verification methods for those who cannot provide standard documentation, including attestation under penalty of perjury and providing other evidence as determined by the Election Assistance Commission and states. So this is not about trying to keep women from voting. This is not about some gotcha moment where Republicans say, here's our master plan. We're going to make people get an ID, and that ID has to match the name of a birth certificate, and women who change their names when they get married are not going to be able to vote. What percentage? So women who don't change their names can vote. So why wouldn't Republicans target those folks? I don't know, but my instincts tell me women, and listen, if you're a woman who's a conservative who hasn't changed their name, that's your business. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying I would think statistically, women who don't change their names would be higher Democrat than Republican, even amongst the general female population. So why wouldn't Republicans have found a way to target that group is the point. So that's where this thing stands. It's totally misrepresented by the Democrat Party, but of course we knew that already. It's par for the course. I mentioned that this act was passed wasn't passed unanimously, but it had all Republicans. Every Republican in the House of Representatives voted for this thing, as did four Democrats in the House of Representatives. So it's technically bipartisan. I don't see headlines about that today. House passes bipartisan SAVE Act. That's what it should say. We're told that bipartisanship is this greatest accomplishment that we could ever possibly have. Republicans went across the aisle. They extended the olive branch. They reached over there and they pulled four Democrats over to the side of sanity in the House of Representatives to vote for the SAVE Act. It's bipartisan. I'm looking for headlines that say that. Maybe there's some out there because there's a lot of news stories, but I sure haven't seen them today. And the question remains, will 7 Democrats join the Republicans to end any filibuster of this bill? It's unlikely, but of course, who knows, my friend. So in the Senate, in the House, it's simple majority. In the Senate, it's simple majority as well, but they've got a rule. We've gone through this. You know this. It's the filibuster rule. And basically what it means is that you can have endless debate on an issue. This is what Spartacus was pretending to do the other day. He wasn't really filibustering. He just wanted you to think it was. By the way, in the stack of stuff, do you know that he might have violated, this is fantastic, he might have violated Senate rules, as I bumped my microphone there. Corey Spartacus, might have violated Senate rules whenever he gave that make-believe filibuster because there was a campaign effort going in conjunction, or I should say fundraising effort, working in conjunction with his speaking, and that is a no-no according to Senate rules. It's not like a crime. He can't go to the clink or anything. I'm not arguing for that, but he could be in violation of Senate rules. But filibustering is a real thing, and that's where, unless you get 60 senators to close debate, it's called invoking cloture. Unless you get 60 senators to agree to that, you can't call a bill to a vote by ending debate. And so that would require 60 votes in the Senate. There's 53 Republicans. That would mean all 53 of them would have to basically be on the side of calling this thing to a vote, and there would need to be 7 Democrats. Statistically, that seems unlikely, but we shall see. I've got to take a break, my friends. You're listening to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I am your host, Todd Huff, back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of this, the first hour of the program. It's a fast mover today, but I want to wrap up this conversation here, if I can, talking about the SAVE Act, because I want to move into other things in the next hour of the program. But why isn't this common sense? Why isn't this SAVE Act common sense? Now, I could come on here and tell you my thoughts, but really, why is this sort of thing not common sense? Why would anyone not want someone to prove they're a citizen to vote? And before you say, Todd, we don't like the fact that these individuals who maybe are from demographic groups who don't have enough income to pay for this stuff. Listen, I don't want there to be an unnecessary burden on people. Do you know in my state of Indiana, you can get a free ID for voting? Free. You can get that. It is there. People complained about this, not the free ID. They misrepresented. This is a common tactic to say, look, people can't get IDs. Now you're not letting people without IDs vote. So this is disenfranchising voters. But in reality, that's just not the case. That's not true. States can take additional efforts to say, look, okay, we have a different form of ID that shows on it that you are a legal citizen of the United States of America. You can use that to vote. Maybe it's not a driver's license. Maybe it's not to be used for anything else, but this will identify you at the polls. What is so serious about this? States could do this very thing. I don't know why not, based upon what I've seen in the act. And what's the alternative to not having this? What is the other solution, the other side of this argument, the other side of this debate? This is, my friends, something that this is really beyond common sense. This is fundamentally obvious sorts of, an obvious solution that needs to be adhered to and followed. Now, this also reminds me, I've just got a couple of minutes here, but I did want to mention this, and I'm glad we got to this point. But this does remind me, I saw a man on the street interview. This was some time ago. I've seen it recently again, but I first saw it, I don't know, maybe a year ago. Maybe it was before the election. Sometime in the past year. It's been at least 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year ago. And I don't know who was doing it, so forgive me. But there was an individual who was asking white college liberals about voter ID. And these white college liberals were on there saying how this was racist, how it was an attempt to disenfranchise voters. And this person was asking, so are you saying that people who are black can't get an ID? Well, yeah, it's harder. You should have listened. You should have heard some of the comments. I'm not even comfortable repeating to you some of the things that these folks said, talking about the ability of black Americans to get a voter ID, or the ability of black Americans to get to the license branch, or to get to their local government office, or to be able to get online. Just it's incredible the way that these people were talking about this. These, again, are elitist, leftist, white folks in public universities, private universities too, but answering the questions and were emphatic that voter ID laws were in fact racist. So this same guy goes to Harlem. I think it was Harlem. I know it was New York City area, and he was talking to people on the streets there. He was talking this time to black residents, and he was asking them, is it hard for you to get an ID? And these folks that he was speaking to, and no, it's not hard to get an identification. He's like, oh, well, these college liberals, these white kids in these colleges said that, people in your community can't vote because they can't get IDs. And these folks on the street were saying, I don't know a single person who doesn't have an ID. The folks that he was asking in Harlem were utterly confused because it was such a fundamental part of their lives as well. Shockingly, right? Shockingly. But this is how it's done. They have the white liberals speaking on behalf of the black voter or the minority voter, saying that they can't do something when in reality they obviously can. They obviously have for a long time. They are misrepresenting the problems and concerns with this bill. States can set their particular requirements for some of those other forms of ID that might be acceptable that prove citizenship. This is a make-believe issue. This is faux outrage. This is political theater, and it's not even good political theater. In fact, if you read the vast majority of those tweets and messages on X or wherever they're posting these things on social media, you'll find that someone has given the group of Democrats the talking points, the bullet points. 70 million married women may not be able to vote. 70 million women can't vote because their last names don't match their birth certificate. Not only is this the patriarchy rearing its ugly head in 21st century America, now it's being used to keep women from voting. This is an obvious attempt to silence the women vote, which again still goes towards the Democrats in a lot of instances, in a lot of ways. By the way, did you see? I think the only group of white voters in 2024 to vote, heavily or even at all for the Democrats, for Kamala Harris, were quote unquote educated white women. So anyway, I'm just out of time here this segment, my friends. Got to wrap up this hour. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you on the other side of the hour. SDG.